We have also been looking at the World Anti-Doping Agency list of drugs. This is a list of drugs put together with a completely different purpose to the lists we normally deal with, and deals with abuse of substances that might enhance performance in athletes. And so some of the substances on their list are not necessarily going to be covered by the misuse of drug regulations, but it's part of our responsibility where drugs do overlap and where it does look sensible to control them under the Misuse of Drugs Act, that we look at this, and that again is work in progress. We're about to make some recommendations on one set of drugs to ACMD, and later in the year we'll be considering another set of drugs from that particular report. And then the last item we've considered, again at our meeting in July, was this substance DPMP, the well-known stimulant compound and some of its analogues. And again, a recommendation was made to ACMD that has gone forward, and as Les mentioned, that is available to anybody who's interested on the website. And so I think that's all I would like to say at the moment, but there's a lot on the agenda for the technical committee, and we'll be reporting back to ACMD again later in the year.
Well, next we're going to talk about the Recovery Committee. Just to give you a bit of background here, the new coalition government drug strategy document published last year emphasises, rather than emphasising harm reduction, it emphasises recovery from addiction as one of the key themes. As part of that, we have been asked by government to consider forming a new committee that would deal with issues around recovery agenda, and as always, the ACMD will try to provide evidence-based advice to government on the various approaches to this problem and how much evidence there is to back up any particular approach. I'm going to ask the co-chairs of this group, Annette Dale Pereira on my left, and Richard Phillips, to say a few words about where they are with this program.
Thank you very much, Les. Just adding to that little bit of history, I think it's also worth recapping that roughly a year ago, the ACMD established a treatment working group to look at some specific issues around treatment to services that were available to people who were attempting to recover from substance misuse problems. And the letter from the Interministerial Group on Drugs invited us to establish a standing committee where we were putting the recovery agenda much more kind of firmly on the agenda of the ACMD. What was also very clear was that the recovery committee needed to have a wider scope than the treatment working group, because the kind of recovery agenda also includes things like housing, employment, and wider structures that are needed to be available to people who are attempting to recover fully from substance misuse. So we reviewed the existing treatment working group, which had begun work but hadn't actually produced any reports at that time, and we decided that the best approach would be to fold the intended work streams from the treatment work group into the new recovery group. So that was the approach that we took. Now, one of the main challenges that we've got with the recovery committee is the breadth of the scope that we have before us. If you think about the process of recovery from a serious addiction is very complicated and potentially involves a large number of different agencies, and almost every area of somebody's life could be kind of considered within the recovery committee. So the first thing that we did was we invited kind of membership from the council, and we identified 8 members of the council who had very significant expertise that they were able to bring to the committee. And then we did a mapping exercise where we examined the scope of the recovery agenda and the kind of issues that we would need to consider, and mapped that against the skills that we were able to bring to bear against that kind of within the council. And we identified the additional areas of expertise that we thought that we would need to bring in. So we've identified areas to bring in an additional 12 co-optees to the Recovery Committee, covering a wide range of additional experience, including bringing in more people with expertise by experience, so people who've actually recovered from substance misuse through say, abstinence-based fellowships, and also people who have are in recovery with maintenance, with medication-assisted recovery. So that process is underway, so we're in the process at the moment of identifying those additional co-optees. The work is expected to cover both reports, wider thematic reports on kind of big issues involved in the recovery agenda, but also we will attempt to respond to specific questions raised by government or things that kind of emerge during the course of the year. In terms of the actual the purpose of the committee, the kind of the headline purpose reflects the one part of the role of the ACMD as a whole to advise on how people can best be supported to recover from dependence on drugs and alcohol. And we've had internal discussions and also sought clarification from ministers in terms of what they would like us to be focusing on. So we've also clarified the breadth and scope and what we are able to cover if we so choose. Prevention is within scope. We're able to look at the prevention issue. We're also able to look at young people and obviously treatment services. In relation to alcohol, we're going to consider alcohol where it's a co-occurring problem with drugs, but we won't be looking at alcohol where it is exists kind of alcohol dependence entirely separate from other drugs misuse. And this is clarification of the terms and reference in the pack that we need to make outside of this meeting. The actual way that we intend to work is a fairly, we intend to produce shorter reports on a faster timescale than has historically been the case with the ACMD. So now I'm going to hand over to Annette, who's going to talk through the kind of methodology and work progress to date.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Okay, so our activity to date, we've had our first meeting, that was on the 1st of September. We had very, very helpful presentations from lots of different government departments on what they were doing in terms of the agenda, in terms of activity. We also had a very helpful presentation from the Recovery Partnership. And essentially, this is a consortium of the Substance Misuse Consortium, the Recovery Group UK and DrugScope, who are doing lots of very good and interesting work in this area. I think Richard said part of our mandate is to add value, it's to not duplicate other people's work. So we heard views of government departments and the Recovery Committee about what they're doing and what they would like us to prioritise. We then attended a meeting of the Interministerial Group on Drugs on the 13th of September to update ministers on our progress and then also kind of ask for clarification on a couple of things. So we're waiting for that to come back for us. And we're currently scoping the first report and we're about to have our second meeting. And we thought that our first report essentially will be a scoping exercise looking at what are the contribution of different areas to recovery. So for example, housing, for example, employment, what's the contribution of employment, and we look to see what evidence is in those areas and what the gaps are, and then we'll prioritise in terms of our work programme. So our next meeting is on the 28th of November and we're very much looking forward to working on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the Council?
Observation that this is very much in line and supportive of the government's current drug strategy, which is, as we know, has three streams, build and recovery being key to it. I think it's a good example of Council working in line and supporting the strategy that's in place, and hopefully we're able to put some information to policymakers on it.
I should say that Nigel is our Council member representing the Serious Organised Crime Agency and has provided all sorts of valuable input to our proceedings.
You mentioned housing and employment. What about the whole issue of welfare benefits? Is that going to be considered as well?
Yes, we're going to look at that. That's definitely in the scoping exercise because we think that that's probably key to some aspects of recovery. But we welcome suggestions from the committee as well.
We are seeking specific expertise from that area.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think it's enormously positive that we have this committee, and I'm delighted to hear that we are going to be able to include alcohol in our considerations when somebody's using alcohol with other substances. The recent death of Amy Winehouse shows, I think, just how important it is that we don't miss alcohol as being part of the picture of cross-addiction.
Thank you for those useful inputs. ACMD studying alcohol dependence is a first. We've never ventured into that territory, and we believe it is only alcohol use in conjunction with other drugs of misuse, but we're seeking clarification on that. We're going to move on to some of the other working groups that we have in place. Simon will talk about new psychiatric substance working group. The report is one of the main agenda items, but there are other things going on.
Thank you very much, Les. As you said, the report I spoke about earlier is one of the main pieces of work we've been involved in over the last 12 months. And there's also been quite a lot of work gone in the background with some of the other reports, in particular the report on desoxypiprazole. My thanks go to every member of the work group for actually chipping in with that piece of work as well. We've received presentations on the forensic early warning system from Bill McKenzie. Now this system actually looks at the new psychiatric substances which are actually available and appearing in the United Kingdom. We also had a presentation at the beginning of this month from Anna Galagos from the European Monitoring Centre on Drugs and Drug Addiction. Anna was able to give us a very nice overview of the legal highs that are actually appearing in the different member countries across the EU, and that's very useful information to us. And the last point really is to mention the excellent work done by Dr. John Corkery, who's here in the public gallery. John's work on the national programme of substance abuse deaths is absolutely invaluable to us, and we had an update from John at the end of our session at the beginning of this month on mephedrone and collating some of the new data, which was absolutely invaluable, I would say, to our new report that's just been published. We have a meeting proposed for the beginning of 2012. I'm sure there'll be more work coming towards us and some of the new compounds are actually soon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think of great value to this group and to the ACMD in general has been their Home Office forensic early warning system, which is now working extremely well, which is a system which involves the sophisticated chemical analysis of drugs that have been seized or test purchased, and gives us an idea from month to month of which new compounds are coming along, which ones are being used. Only a couple of weeks after the Glastonbury Festival, we were able to see just which drugs had been picked up at that particular large event, and that is a very, very valuable source of warning data for problems that are heading our way. And I'm pleased to say that that group has secured some sort of secure funding for at least some years ahead, and we're very pleased with that. Another working group is polysubstance use. This is in response to a ministerial request that we look at this issue. The issue is that young people nowadays who take various drugs don't usually take just one at a time. They go out and go on a drug binge, which may include several different agents. And we've been tasked to look at this problem. It's, from a pharmacology point of view, it's an impossible problem to answer because the number of combinations is almost infinite. But at least we hope we can point out some of the more dangerous ones. So Fiona, where are we?
Okay, thanks. We're in the middle of our evidence gathering at the moment for this working group. We had an evidence gathering session in July, a whole day packed with some fascinating, excellent presentations from people in the field. We looked at the prevalence and patterns of polydrug use and also patterns of polydrug deaths as well. We heard that in Lancashire there's been a study looking at drug-related deaths that found that 97% of drug-related deaths actually involved multiple drugs. We're looking at drug markets and the way that multiple commodity brokers work at the middle and lower levels of drug markets. So there's issues of supply and demand in relation to that. And also the motivations for use in terms of people taking a second or third drug to either enhance the first or to